So I'm gonna have this mic, even though you're not gonna hear me louder. It's ridiculous, I know, but it's for our recordings. So basically, everybody on the internet can hear me. But thank you all for coming. As usually, or actually, since last time, we have this new segment where we showcase some cool Croatian startups. And today, we're gonna have Matija from Farseer do her pitch, or at least present the company to you guys, and then we're gonna talk to Pratima about getting your first round. So without further ado, I'm gonna give you Matija, and she's gonna tell you more about Farseer. Please give her a round of applause.
Hi guys. Can you see the slides, or do I have to do something special here? This one, right? Oh, here we go. Ooh. Here, 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 here. Okay. I see some SQ Capital Gang members here. So hi to them and hi to everybody else. My name is Matija Nakic. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Farseer. And whoa, okay, let's go again. A little bit about me. I've been building enterprise software since 2010. I know I'm dating myself now, but yeah, fuck it. I'm an ex-athlete. I'm the type of person who knew from college that they wanted to build enterprise software. And I went to the dark side a little bit. I finished an MBA just to understand this whole business thing. It's pretty easy. For engineers at least. Yeah, I started Farseer in the 7 months of my pregnancy. So my son went through all of this with me, which was super fun. For me at least, I don't know what he will say about all this. And in my free time, I dabble with piano and I really read a lot, like a lot. So that's me. And basically, our story started from battling with the Excel, you know, the internal friend and enemy. We all have kind of a love and hate relationship with Excel, but I think it's really the best app ever. And the number of users and the number of use cases are confirming it. So Farseer is essentially a tool for business modeling, business planning, business forecasting, and business analytics. And I say business continuously because they push us into financial planning, but we do all kinds of things. So any kind of a number that a business needs to plan, forecast, simulate, or do analytics on, we're there. We mostly serve mid-market and enterprise customers. Some of them you probably know: Croatian Telecom, A1, Končar Group, Violeta, Jadran-Galenski Laboratorij, Podravka, and so on. And we're mostly based now here in the region and expanding towards DACH now and Central and Eastern Europe. We're still essentially enterprise-ish, which means that we implement the software at the client's premises, so to speak. And we have our own team that does implementations of Farseer, but we also have partners that learn our technology and then substitute a lot of Excels with the customer. We started solving our own problem in planning and forecasting. And like I said, Excel is really, really great until you have 2 or more people working on it. And some of our clients have 10, 50, 100, or even 200 people simultaneously using Excel or emailing it to each other, or having it on a drive or whatever. And that gets very, very complicated and very, very ugly. We found literally millions of euros of errors in our customers' model while translating it onto Farseer. And essentially, Excel, as good as it is and as flexible as it is, it's also a 2-dimensional array. Like, that's it. It essentially ignores all the lessons that we learned from databases, and it's spaghetti code. It's very hard to find your mistake. And then you have this, there's no versions, then you have this, there's something, but you don't know what that something is, and it's very hard to detect. But even worse are the invisible errors. So those invisible errors have costed companies literally billions of euros. You can go online and search for biggest mistakes in Excel and find companies like JP Morgan, Barclays, and so on that did very banal but very, very money-heavy Excel mistakes. And oh, this is also a cute one. On the other side, you know, of this x-axis, of flexibility in modeling, you have enterprise software. Like Excel is really easy to start using. You just go in, you start putting things in, something happens, great, you have a calculation. On the other end of the spectrum is SAP and IBM and tools like that. I remember when I started working in a telecom, I opened SAP or SAP. I almost started crying. I was like, oh my God. Is this going to be the rest of my life? Luckily, I was in IT, so I didn't have to work in the tool. But it was very, very hard for me because it felt like prison. And it kind of is for customers because it's very consultant heavy, which means you can not change things without a very educated technical consultant, a very expensive one as well. It's very user hostile and, you know, kind of click, 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 and you click through a bunch of forms and you don't know where you are anymore, and then you just shut down the computer and put it on again, something like that. And it's honestly really ugly. And, you know, we wanted to change this whole paradigm of enterprise software. This is my co-founding team. There's 4 of us, and we raised the seed round about a year ago for $1.5 million, and we're now 20 people intensively building the product and starting quite aggressively with the go-to-market approach for here and abroad as well. We essentially had no knowledge of finances, which turned out to be a very good thing because we went, you know, to first principles thinking. And we didn't copy the competition because we didn't even know who the competition is. And I think our stupidity was extremely useful in the end because we managed to create this beautiful universal tool in which you can model everything. We essentially created Excel on steroids. And this is the pitch that is regurgitated to me back by the press. So it's clearly working. So I will keep using it. And we do so many things to make the lives of our customers easier, and we think that enterprise software has to be beautiful and easy to use, and that our customers have to have autonomy, that they have to be the owners of their models, of their reports, of their processes, of their user management, the whole shebang. Because if they could do it in Excel, why can't they do it in some other tool that is built for that purpose? A really interesting thing has happened in the past few months. Our customers started hacking Farseer. So one of our customers built a timesheet app, so to speak, in Farseer. One of them built a whole invoicing database, and then they asked for basically us publishing the invoice in the PDF and so on. And then we went back to the drawing board as the founding team, and we thought a lot. And after 5 days of thinking, we kind of came out with this. You cannot believe how much time it takes to write something like this. And this is essentially the vision of our product. It's big, it's bold, it's essentially saying, if I translate it, that Farseer will be the platform on which our customers and our partners will build any kind of enterprise software. Because any kind of enterprise software can be distilled to some basic components. That's basically a database, that's some formulas, that's some logics, if this, then that, right? That's some user permission and management, that's collaboration, and our secret sauce in-memory calculation engine that can crunch a lot of numbers in real time, like millions or tens of millions of cells. So our customers use huge connected models on a single database, and it all feels like one sheet in Excel for every single user. And they can be 100 or even more of them working at the same time. I will finish with this. It might seem cheesy, but I truly believe this. The people who are crazy enough to think that they can change the world are the ones who actually do it in the end. And I'm here for questions. So if you want to follow Farseer, we write about some fun stuff. Not all enterprise software should be boring. We have our newsletter going out bi-weekly. We basically just write about things that we would like to read about, and that's it. So you can subscribe here, and yeah, you can follow me on LinkedIn. I write almost every day about startups, software, culture, and enterprise stupidity. So that's it. Thanks, guys. Oh my God, I moved like 2 meters away.
Anybody has questions for Matija now? There you go.
Who is drawing your illustrations?
Me and Dali.
They're really great.
Thanks.
Does it help to post every day on LinkedIn?
If you mean help lose my sanity, yes. But yeah, for the rest, we will see. We will see.
That's it.
Okay.
Do still shares?
Not at the moment.
We could get in. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Vedran.
So, let me just get this. I don't think we need this one. I don't know. Somebody will take care of it. So, I'm just gonna. You have to work the mic whenever you're talking. I don't know. So again, thanks everybody for coming. I'll go through this briefly. Drinks and snacks are all over the place. There's beer. I've learned to say Coca-Cola instead of Coke. So there's Coca-Cola everywhere, not Coke. Water, snacks, whatever it is that you need. And more importantly, there are pizzas coming from a pizzeria below. They're going to come by the time we're finished, going to be served here. There's going to be more than enough for everybody. So please feel free to kind of take a bite and mingle around. Pratima will kind of give her 10 minutes so she can eat something, and then she'll circle around. You can ask questions. You can do whatever it is that you need to do. But essentially, the premise of today's kind of conversation is all about getting the first kind of funding round. And, you know, I think that getting the first round is always hard because everything is at the end of the day stacked against you. Like nobody knows you. Nobody's kind of willing to give you money because nobody else gave you money. So you somehow need to get that first investor interested and first investor on board so that other people can start believing in your vision as well. And I have Pratima from Nauta here to talk about that and run you through it. I'm going to give a short intro about Pratima, and then I'm going to let you do all the hard work. But essentially, I've met Pratima in early 2021. You've mentioned today, I think that was in January or something like that. Pratima and Nauta are actually our investors in Treblle. They led the first round, and they participated in our second round as well. They've been a tremendous partner through this entire journey, and also Pratima helped me kind of personally understand the world that you know, of VCs investing and kind of generally startups. So I think whatever she says will probably make more sense and kind of be meaningful for all of you. So before we dive into the topic, Pratima, if you can tell us a bit about yourself, how you ended up in VC, what's the background? I know you have an interesting background, and if you could tell us a bit more about Nauta so people kind of understand what you guys do.
Sure thing. So maybe before going into my intro, I just wanted to also extend a welcome to all of you guys and girls. I think the builders, entrepreneurs here, everything around the startup ecosystem, the lawyers, the VCs, the service providers, they all exist because you exist. So you are the ones who are building something from nothing. And on this sort of entrepreneurial journey, sometimes you have the product idea, sometimes you have the commercial acumen, but there's a lot more that needs to go around building the business. And it's communities like this where you might find your next talent, you might find somebody who will introduce you to the next VC. So I also think there's a lot of power in attending some of these early stage events. And you'll have heard also about, the incubators like YC, where the early batch, we saw people like Alexis Ohanian come out, Sam Altman. So see who you're sitting next to. They may go on to found the next Infobip. So I think these communities are very valuable. So I'll jump in and maybe introduce myself. As Vedran said, I'm one of the partners at Nauta Capital. Maybe a bit about the fund first, then go into my background. So as a fund, we invest traditionally at what we call seed and Series A stages, typically with 1 to 5 million checks. The fund is a B2B software-focused fund, so we're looking at companies that are essentially selling to other businesses. Could be SMBs, could be mid-market or enterprise companies. My focus within that tends to be more on the enterprise end of things and also looking at what we call software infrastructure, so technology that goes under the hood. But each partner tends to have sort of a thematic focus within the B2B space as well. We are on our 5th fund at the moment, so the firm has been around for a long time. We're investing out of the 5th vehicle, also in the market, starting to fundraise now, and we think we'll launch the next fund in January of 25. Bit about my background. So I started out as a software developer, maybe like a lot of yourselves, and definitely like Vedran here. So I studied computer science and spent the first part of my career in the US as a software developer, as a product manager with Cisco. So I started my career coincidentally around the time that the dot-com bubble was just bursting, so 2001 January, and I ended up being the junior-most person within my organization for a good 3 years before somebody was hired at that time. But it gave a lot of experience, good experience, joining an organization like that. And having moved through different functions, different business units, starting out in what was called network management, then I moved to voice technologies and the security BU. I then left, moved to Europe, did an MBA around 2009, and then shifted my career to the more finance end of things. Started out in public markets as an equity analyst with a French investment bank, worked at a startup, and then went back to Cisco to do corporate development. So this is a entirely different function within a large company, and a lot of companies have this as well. Many large organizations are doing what we call both inorganic and organic growth. So from their cash flows, they're funding R&D, building new products, but equally they've got dedicated resources to go look at products outside and see how can we maybe acquire something, bring it in, and bolt it onto a platform that we might be building. So that team is corporate development. So I worked on a lot of acquisitions for Cisco, but also we did what we call strategic investing. So much like VC, venture capital, a lot of large corporates as well dedicate capital to investing in startups, so that as a corporate VC. So first started investing in 2011. So it's been more than a decade now investing in startups, and having spent about 7 or 8 years doing this corporate development function within Cisco, there were sort of 2 natural paths for me, either to continue doing M&A, so acquiring businesses, or jump into early stage, which is what I ended up doing. So started out with a US-based fund called Paladin, which does cybersecurity focus, and then moved to Nauta.
Nice.
Long-winded answer.
Are you happy with the path so far? Or would you have been happier in M&A?
I think, to be honest, this is where the energy is.
Okay.
So what we see coming out, every wave brings innovation, brings the opportunity of radically shifting and disrupting the market. So I find it extremely exciting.
Cool. So a lot of excitement probably in the AI space, but yeah, we'll get to that. So you see hundreds of early stage companies that are every year going out to raise, pitching to you, pitching to Nauta, pitching to all your partners. And one of the kind of probably the fundamental question that I think a lot of people ask themselves is, what should I have for that first funding round? What should I prepare? Should I have a demo? Should I have an MVP? Should it only be a slide deck? Do I need to have revenue? You know, what's the kind of mechanic, like what makes the most impact on you when startups come out and present for the first time to you?
Okay, I think it's probably worthwhile just talking about stages a little bit. Usually for us, when we think about investing, the first institutional round usually is called the seed round. There are obviously, I think, pre-seed funds as well, which invest before that. But just for this discussion, if we say everything before the seed round is either angels or friends and family, and the institutional round that happens is the seed round. So at the seed round, what should you look like and what should you have prepared when you're going out to talk to an investor? Anecdotally as well, a lot of you might have heard about, especially in this Gen AI buzz, companies writing a 5-page memo and raising tens and, hundreds of millions perhaps. Is that normal? No. It's highly unusual, but it has a lot to do with perhaps the team that's putting that together and the promise of what they're building. But for the average startup, what should we be thinking about? I think the advice that we usually give companies when they're coming out to raise at this seed stage is essentially, one is you're selling yourself. It's the founder. What is that compelling insight that you have about the industry that you're building the software in? And what makes this the right time for you to be building it? And also, I think from then, it then ends up being how far you've progressed that idea. So being prepared to address some of these questions from the investors, I think, is what we're looking for in that first meeting. Are you still sort of exploring the idea of, should I be a founder? Should I set this company up? Or do you have some of these answers? I think there's no wrong answer here, but sometimes you might have to do that exploratory phase with what we call friendly investors.
Okay. Who are those?
You make friends. So you go to these events. So a lot of the people here could very well reach out to me and say, look, I'm thinking about this. Should I be raising? Should I not be raising? And equally, a lot of VCs do these sort of, one-on-one meetings, or you can set those up where it's not a pitch. It's more an exploration.
A conversation.
A conversation worth having, I think.
Okay. Do you prefer seeing a demo at the seed stage? Do you need to have a demo of a working product end to end or something like that?
So at the seed stage, typically, and again, I think it's very VC specific driven. Would you invest pre-product or would you not invest pre-product?
Okay.
So in a lot of cases for us, something should be there to see. So if it's 2 people with a pitch deck, probably not us. Okay, but if there is a demo, if there is a working demo that, a couple of POCs you've already got running, I think that's a good place to be.
Okay, interesting. So no hard limit on revenue. You don't have to have revenue to go out and raise the seed round. Or again, it depends.
I think it really depends. And I think this is the hard thing, I think, for founders to hear as well. There are VCs who will have very strict guidelines of we want to see, 15, 20, 30K MRR, but those numbers perhaps come from an idea of what the ACV is. But if you're an enterprise software company and you think your accounts are going to be something like 150, 200K, and you haven't yet landed the first one, but when the first one lands, immediately you've got 200K. So I think it's a little bit...
interesting.
Depends.
Okay. Now, your first investor is going to be, somebody who's going to follow you down the line for the longest amount of time. For example, we've been together, or you guys have been, we've been partners for the past 3 years. We have new investors, but they've only been with us for a year. And, I remember it's really hard making the decision, I've never talked to investors before 2021, so it's super hard for me to understand who is a good investor to talk to, right? Do you have any advice how should a founder basically approach this? I know we've talked multiple times about founder market fit, where basically not every founder, if you put me into something like Matija is doing, I probably wouldn't excel a lot, pun intended, because I hate Excel. But maybe we share that passion. But generally speaking, is there something how do you align with the investors? Should you look at their website, try to figure out what they've invested in? Should you go talk to them? How does it work?
So maybe let's take a step back, right? It's a very interesting question. I think much like hiring, which you've done now as well with your company, each individual that you add to this mix changes it in a certain way.
Okay.
And bringing a VC on board is very similar to that. So which VC you bring on board will guide your thinking on how this company needs to move forward. And also, I think equally, just taking a step back, not every company needs to raise venture capital. So think about any sort of, family business being cash flow positive. It could be a good outcome for the family. It could be a very successful venture. What kind of companies are essentially venture capital is a very specific asset class. The way we build the portfolio, the way we think returns are going to be generated. For example, in our case, our portfolio is perhaps 30 companies. Of these, only 2 or 3 of them are going to actually be returners. And the majority of them are not going to get there. So when we get in and when we write the first check, each one of these companies we believe is going to be that moonshot. Every one of them has the opportunity. In the end, they don't get there.
Okay.
So when you're going out to raise venture capital, I think that's the mindset as well that you need to think about, that the VC has this in their mind. The VC has it in their mind that you are likely to, shoot for that. If that's not what your aspiration is, then probably it's not the right place for you to be looking for capital. There are other sources, you should consider them. Then I think the next part is sort of, once you've decided, yes, I'm going to raise VC capital, right? Who should you be looking for? I think the big picture here is about aligning on vision. What kind of company are you building? And like you said about sort of founder market fit, I think there's also the classification, if you will, of the entire VC space is there are a lot of generalist firms. They tend to invest in very broad areas. For example, even within our firm, we say we are B2B software. It could be fintech, it could be health tech, it could be insurtech, it could equally be a developer tools company. But there are partners within those funds who will have very specific focus. So if you are building something in the API space and you go and pitch the wrong partner, they will not have the depth of understanding of it. And it takes a while to appreciate what you're building. Equally, if you're building an open source company and you go and pitch a B2C investor, they have no way of understanding what are the metrics, how should I be evaluating it.
Everybody knows about GitHub stars at this point in time. But yeah, I agree. Like from personal experience, like if you go out and talk to investors who don't have experience, their questions are different. Their mindset is different. The information that they're looking for is quite different than people who actually understand the space. But yeah, I couldn't agree more. Pitching. I'm assuming nobody is born a good pitcher, right? You get better with time, and probably the first pitch is not going to be the best. Is that something, do you think, that can ruin chances for you as a startup if you go out and pitch and you do it wrongly? Should you kind of go practice in front of the mirror or go in front of friends and do it? And is there something that you're looking for in that startup pitch that you'd like to see any company kind of have?
Okay, so I think breaking that into the way you pitch and what we're looking for in that first meeting. I think should you practice? I think a lot of accelerators, etc., spend a lot of time training people how to perfect the idea and the notion of the pitch. Your 30-second elevator pitch, your 5-minute pitch, your 12-minute pitch, whatever it is. So condensing all the relevant information into that time frame and being able to deliver it. And I think Matija did an amazing job today. So I think bringing that into and practicing it to make sure you can deliver it, absolutely, no doubt. From our perspective, and also I think from a pitch meeting with a VC, ideally, we like to have seen the founder somewhere. So in an event like this, for example, or a lot of our team are at some of the bigger events like KubeCon or like Web Summit, and we'll meet founders and hear them and get to know them many months before they come in and formally pitch us. Mm-hmm. So there are some aspects of that which is about building relationships. But eventually when, let's say a meeting has been set up saying, look, you're going to meet this partner at a VC fund and let's, set up this pitch. In that pitch, we are looking for the preparedness. So bring a prepared mind for the kinds of questions that will be asked in that. How are you going to use this capital that you will raise? Have you thought about, and obviously you say you're going to be hiring. Have you thought about those candidates? Do you have a CMO in mind that you're going to bring on board? Do you think that you need so many people in the customer success side? What does your pipeline look like today? And have you thought about developing this more for the mid-market instead of the enterprise? So we will be asking these questions, not because you need to have an answer specifically, but that you're prepared to answer them.
Yeah, so you don't chicken out, right? Okay. So even if you answer incorrectly, it's still better than no answer, right?
I think it's not to shy away from it, but show that you've thought about this. And I think this again goes back to the sort of the analogy of, are you the right founder for this space? And I think there's, people talk about athletes, right? And, you're a tall person, perhaps basketball's the right sport for you. You've got long limbs and perhaps you're going to be a sprinter. So what is it that's unique and, about you that's going to make this a success? What do you know?
Yeah, I know, and it'd be interesting to see how I did the first time I pitched you, but definitely probably got better by now. But it is true, and also one thing I've observed, sometimes you guys ask the weirdest questions, so you could, people can throw you off or whatever. You still need to have an answer or at least an opinion. I think it's all about.
Do you remember any of them?
So my opinions, the interview we did with you. So I know I pitched to Sagar for the first time, and he was pretty happy. I remember you being pretty strict. I was like, oh shit, Pratima is pretty strict, whereas Sagar was very kind of loose. But then as time went on, I kind of, it was more of a conversation with you, and I think it still is. Even on the board meetings, you might have an opinion. I might have an opinion. Sometimes you're right. Sometimes maybe I'm right. Maybe we don't know. But generally, it's about me trying to understand your opinion. You trying to understand my opinion, and that's what I remember how it was since the beginning and how it is now.
I think so. I think that's a good characterization because essentially there's a point at which we've decided that we're taking this forward to our investment committee, and at that point, the pitch is more to the wider audience, not so much to the partner who's sort of, leading that investment.
Yeah. Interesting. On that note, and we've had these conversations when we were kind of trying to make the deal happen, a lot of early stage founders and even sometimes even late stage think that they're worth 10 times more than they are. So I don't know, you'll see a lot of startups, I won't raise, anything below 20 million evaluation, 100 million evaluation. I want only 5% for investors or something like that. And that kind of causes a lot of friction. And I've seen actually deals fall apart because of these things. What's your recommendation when it comes to valuation and trying to understand and get a sensible valuation? And what are some of the kind of standards there? Because I didn't even know, what we should ask for. To me, it was I just want to build this. Let's try to figure out what's sensible. So what do you think? How should people approach that?
Yeah, Firstly, I think valuation can be a whole session in itself.
Of course.
So let's try to condense that as much as we can. At the very earliest stage, for example, when Vedran was raising or when you're raising your seed round of capital, not a lot of company building has yet happened. Not a lot of traction exists. So traditional sort of financial valuation metrics, for example, a revenue multiple or an EBITDA multiple, don't make any sense. There isn't anything to multiply with. So how should we come up with a valuation? So there is a lot of art, more art than science, to be honest. And it has to do with the new investor who wants to put in capital into the business, what kind of ownership requirements they might have. So this is what slice of the pie would they like to take? So when we started out, let's say Vedran had the whole pie. When we're coming in, what would Nauta like to take? So based on that, the valuation is kind of agreed, and of course, there's a negotiation. But broad parameters, that's probably how it works in the first, maybe even the second round. After that, once you start getting to more later stages and you have revenue to show, at that point, it starts making sense to have, you look at comparables, you look at other companies, how they're valued, you look at public market multiples. But before that, it wouldn't make a lot of sense. But again, I think a lot of founders may have in their opinion as well, right? We don't want to give away a lot of ownership. And I think that's a good mindset to have. You are building a company for the long term, and this won't be the only capital you take. So there have been many, many instances when by the time they've come to raise seed capital from a VC, they've done multiple rounds, perhaps, of friends and families and angels and convertible loan notes. And at the end, they don't know how much equity they've given up. You come to the seed round, and we try to convert all of this debt and look at all the previous stuff. And perhaps 50% is left with the founders at the seed stage. How does that set you up when you need to raise a Series A, where, again, maybe the investor is going to take 15, 20%, and then a B and a C? And hopefully you are trying to build a long-term company, which is going to require that capital.
So you said 15 to 20%. I think that's basically like, from my experience at seed and Series A, that's usually the number I've seen, and the number.
That's a broad, yeah.
Exactly. That's something that generally for seed stage, if you get 15%, you've done a really, really good job. And if you get more than 20, then maybe you could have negotiated better. But still, anything in that line makes sense, and I would say is reasonably fair, because you guys are taking on a lot of risk yourself as well. But we've talked about many different scenarios where people wanted, like, they didn't even have a product and wanted 50 million valuations, et cetera, et cetera. So, and I think one of the earliest things that you've told me is, like, think about the next round. Like, if you get, let's say we wanted a 50 million valuation of Treblle on the seed round, how much would we have had to make money-wise in order for somebody else to be able to say, okay, now this company is worth $200 million dollars? What kind of a revenue would we have to get in order to get to that actual valuation?
Yep.
So it kind of makes sense. Now, we've kind of briefly touched upon this, and this is something I didn't even know how the process looks like when we first kind of did it. I just went with the flow, and the meetings just kept piling on. But generally, like, let's say you pique the interest of a fund or a founder or a partner, what actually happens then? Like, how many meetings does it take to actually raise a round, and what does that different process looks like? What do you actually do in multiple different stages of that process? I assume you start with an associate, so somebody who doesn't have power to basically decide whether or not they're going to invest. And then where do we go from there?
Yeah. So I think the one thing worth noting here as well is different firms work very differently in terms of process. And also, I think there are now a lot of firms which tend to be partner only.
Okay.
So that's the style. They want to interact with the founder from day one. They want to run the entire process. It's sort of less reliant on this hierarchy and things like that. Some firms still have the structure. I don't think there's any, per se difference in how it would work. But in our firm, we do have associates. They might meet companies, like I said, at events, doing outbound, might have the first call, and we review deals on a weekly basis.
Okay.
So as a team, and across the offices as well, we're looking at every company that's been met by any one of our team members on a weekly basis. And then on that list, what we're looking for is, we've got our idea of flags. Like, this is not going to work. For example, founder ownership already at 40%. How would this work from a deal structure perspective?
Okay.
Or they've raised too much capital. They've already raised 20 million to date. No way that we could do around here. So some of those obviously fall off. And then of the remaining, depending on where, what bandwidth we might have, we then start to allocate and say, okay, we're going to run with this. And usually, at least at our firm, it's a two-stage process. And a lot of firms have this kind of a process where the initial stage is to get past the sort of concept or idea that this market is interesting and this company within this market is interesting. And all the partnership usually, in our case, the whole partnership is involved in that discussion. We get some feedback. We go back and we run the process with the company to trying to dig in. Some questions might have come up about their go-to-market perhaps, or their exact ACV and how that's shifting. If it's more at the seed stage, there could be other questions about gaps within the management team, how they're going to fill that to build out the company. And then we'll work with the company to understand their thinking on those pieces specifically, and preparing up to the IC. Again, a lot of VC.
That's one of the things that I didn't know even existed. You kept telling me, like, we got to prepare you for the IC. We got to prepare you for the IC. So essentially, for people who don't know, IC is like a investment commitment committee within the kind of fund, and then basically the entire company decides on your fate. So Pratima might be very interested in Treblle, but maybe 5 other people from the fund are not, and then nothing happens. So could you walk us through the IC meeting, what happens then, and why is it so important?
Okay. So the investment committee, as Vedran alluded to, is essentially where the decision is being made, go, no go. Should we invest in this company? Should we invest on these terms or not? Typically, all the partners in the firm are on that investment committee, and whoever the sponsoring partner is. So basically, in our case, in the case of Treblle, I was the sponsoring partner. So I've prepared the company to pitch our IC. They come in and they go through their entire pitch deck and the proposition and what their ask is. And usually that investment committee meeting right after that pitch is just the partners deliberating on whether or not we should move forward with the investment. What I would say is, and I think this is one of the things that you and I discussed as well, once you've reached that point, is it in the bag? Is it just a matter of sort of,
Is it a formality?
Is it a formality? No, it's not a formality. I think, but in seed stage, I think a lot of trust actually exists between the partners, because there is not a lot of data. Okay, so whoever the sponsoring partner is, the assumption is that a lot of work has been done to understand both the risks and how we as a firm may also be able to help the company mitigate those risks. So there's very little sort of real ways in which another partner would say, no, there's like no way in hell that we're going to do that investment. So we've made sure that we've deconflicted. There's nothing else in our portfolio. So usually at the seed stage. At the later stages as well, I think if the numbers in terms of how you're growing, how fast you're growing, so there may be questions that are raised on the deal itself.
Like the valuation?
The valuation, the ownership, things like that.
So by the time you get to an investment committee, you already know everything, right? What's the valuation, how much money you're putting in, everything. Can you change that after, like if the investment committee says, hey, we want more money in or less money in? And do you go back to the founder?
Yeah. So what usually happens and what we tend to do is when we're doing these pre-pitch meetings with the founders, we spend a lot of time telling them, for example, let's say you came to us and asked us for 3 million. We have to agree a range. We can't say 3 million is what we're going to go and ask the investment committee for. So within broad parameters, and I think a lot has to do with what you want to put that to work with, right? So would a little bit less work? Would a little bit more work? Probably. So we do simulations along with the company to see the shape of the deal, and it's usually within those parameters. And even if the investment committee discusses it, I don't think it's broadly going to be outside that scope.
Nice.
But then we go back, we actually prepare the term sheet, and we deliver it to the company.
Cool. On the term sheet note, like I remember getting the first term sheet, even from you guys. And basically, I think somebody asked me, is it a good term sheet? I'm like, I have no idea if this is a good term sheet or a bad term sheet. So just like, and then you have to go call in lawyers. That's where things get quite expensive. So before you call the lawyers and things get out of hand expensive, do you guys usually generally issue like a standard term sheet that's like standard industry rates, or what should the founder, like when I look at the term sheet, what should I be looking for? Like, what are the top 3 things that I should be looking for as a founder that are the most important for me to either have more control or get more equity or something like that?
I think I'd start first by saying that all founders should become very familiar with the cap table. So this is basically the share register. You know who has how much, what happens if you take new capital, what is an ESOP pool, what would happen if you increase the ESOP pool, just the mechanics of how the cap table works. That's a starting point for everyone, because I think once you receive the term sheet, usually in our case, we do a simulation of the term sheet of the cap table and attach it at the end, saying this is what you told us your state of the company was, and if we invested in the company, this is what would happen.
To save us some money on the lawyers.
Sorry?
To save us some money on the lawyers.
I think initially, I think it's good practice.
Yeah.
And from our standpoint, I think we think we are pretty standard, run-of-the-mill, nothing unusual.
Terms, yeah.
So at the seed stage, typically, headline valuation. What is the valuation? Valuation of the company is 8 million. Next, you'll see how much money are we going to put in. It could be that, for example, Nauta says we're going to invest 1.5 million, but we're going to leave $500,000 open for somebody else to come in. Could be angels, could be a follower, something like that. That could be a discussion you've already had, or it could be that the deal works for them only if they put 1.5 million.
Okay.
From this, you guess roughly that the dilution in this round is about 20%. Skip to the cap table to make sure that you understand that new investor coming in, taking 20%, I'm going to be left with this. The other pieces which are quite relevant to look at is, and understand before you raise your first round of capital, is about just the share classes. So we're creating a new class of shares when you're raising capital. What does it mean to have this preferred shares? Essentially, I mean, for the people who are sort of not familiar with it, I think that's something that's worth understanding a bit, because the VC is trying to protect themselves for the downside scenario. If you don't sell for that 8 million, you sell only for 3 or 4 million, the first money out of the company goes to the preferred shares. Whatever's left goes to the other shareholders. So what is the preference? 1x non-participating is standard.
Okay.
If you get to a stage where, I don't know, some lot of complicated things have happened, at the seed stage, unusual. You might see 2x. You might see 3x.
So 1 or 2x. 1x is
1x, nothing more than that.
Everything else is
not desirable.
Okay, nice.
So I would say those are probably the top things to look for, but there would be other things about board directors, how do they want the board to be set up, about the ESOP pool, like I said, if you want to top up the ESOP pool. Those would all be the headline terms in the term sheet.
Yeah, the term sheet is not that many pages, right? There's more legal stuff coming afterwards, but essentially, if you agree on those terms, you basically go out and continue on the job, and that's when you can essentially, I guess, say the round is then finished, or at least not. I think after that, you get to this stage where it's like due diligence, and then you get to spend less time with like the fund and less time with everybody else in the fund, but rather more with people who do due diligence. Could you tell us a bit more about that? Like, is there a scenario where a startup can fail the DD process? Like, can you guys agree to invest, and then there's something happens, the due diligence guys kind of discover something, and then you go back and it's like a no-go? Is this something you build into the term sheet, or how does it work?
Yeah. So usually in the term sheet, I think it says very clearly that it's subject to due diligence, which will be conducted, and the legal and the business, technical, etc. So it is subject to all of those due diligences being completed satisfactorily.
So for you, I think we did the financial one, a legal one, and like a tech one, right?
Yeah.
and that's the standard across.
That's the usual standard. And your question, I think, on could there be a red flag that comes up in any one of those? It's possible. So, for example, I mean, we have seen perhaps one case where we've gone through this entire process. We've spent all of this time understanding, the business, the pipeline, the contracts, all of it. But we haven't, and the company had quite a bit of revenue and a lot of contracts. So each contract has not been reviewed, which would be done in this formal process. When we get to the formal financial and commercial due diligence and every contract has been evaluated, we found discrepancies.
So you'll evaluate everything.
It will be done.
Okay.
It will be done.
Nice. So again, when Pratima says it will be done, it will not be done by her, but actually by third-party vendors, usually like, I don't know, due diligence, financial, is somebody in the financial sector. I think for the tech one, we spoke to
So we'll have outside consultants who will come in and do each segment, and they will go in with a fine-tooth comb to make sure everything that exists. If there are commercial contracts, they will review all of them. For technical, they will look at, I don't think they look at the source code, but they'll spend a lot of time looking at the architecture.
He did spend some time looking at the source code with me, and So
highlighting, what's good practice. For example, if the CI/CD, practices are not good, then he will write a report saying, look, these things we think need to be fixed.
Yeah. It was the technical one was rather interesting. The financial one, like my main question was like, what are you going to do financial due diligence on? There's nothing, but there were still things that they spent. So how long? I remember that lasting like at least a month and a half. Is that like, so if you're raising the round, you have to account that in. And if you don't have the money, you have to give it a bit more buffer until that money kind of arrives. So how long does it usually last in your opinion?
So, I mean, if we start from day one, for example, like first meeting with the company, first meeting to the IC could be 4 weeks.
Okay.
I think in a standard process, not in the crazy sort of 2001, 2002. I think there was madness where you'd meet a company on Monday, they'd want a term sheet on Friday. I don't think that's normal. So 4 weeks to get to an IC and get a term sheet. And then perhaps another 4 to 6 weeks for this formal due diligence where we're getting the outside consultants who are conducting all of this due diligence and supporting the process. And they come back with the reports and they share it both with the company and with us.
Yeah, that is true. Maybe the final two questions that I have is, due diligence is done, the money is finally on the bank account. So what should a startup expect next? Is there a board meeting? What do you talk about? I remember you said we need to have a board meeting. I'm like, what are we going to talk about? We just spent like 4 months talking about absolutely everything there is. What else are we going to talk about the board meeting? So is that first board meeting, what's that first board meeting about? Like, is that something that you like to have, or what's the story there?
Okay, so money in the bank. First, celebrate. Yeah, you did it.
Okay.
Got money in the bank. Great. I think from our perspective, there may be things that came up during due diligence, which we want to follow up on. But also, I think as perhaps this is the first institutional round, maybe you didn't have a board before this. This is the first time you are now constituting a board and getting into a more sort of formal process of understanding what you need to present at the board level. This also sets you up for the next fundraise and inviting more people into the board. Perhaps we need to think about an advisory or a technical board. So all of those things are discussions that you will have starting at this first board. So I think in the case of Treblle, since they didn't have a board before, now it was investment, we shared some best practices, a template of what's expected, how to think about sharing the information as well with your investors. So what we are curious to hear about is, you've told us this, amazing story of how you're going to be building this billion-dollar business. We're on day one. We're on day zero now. How are you going to go about doing this, but in a very staged manner? From now to the next board meeting, what do you want to accomplish? And then subsequently, on every subsequent board meeting, what's working well, what's not working well. Are there areas that the board, wider Nauta, could help with? Is there something that is blocking you? Are there issues that we should be discussing as a board? And this has to do with, I mean, there are various different things, like I said, within the...
No, like I said, it was a really nice, pleasant first board. I just wasn't sure. Are we talking about the things that happened or the future, et cetera, et cetera? So
Both.
I know, yeah. And I do like a lot of I hear founders like, oh, we don't have a board, it's just more work. I also feel like there should be a board. That's like my preference was to have a board, because then it just gives you more, I guess, not only credibility, but also it makes you think, like you said, rather differently. So I can't call you one day and tell you, hey, we're probably going to be at like 1 million ARR by the end of the year. And then, you call me at the end of the year, are you at 1 million? And I say no. And then, we're basically screwed.
So there's a disconnect there. So I think that's probably sort of the right way to think about it. And also being there as you're going through it, so that we see this play out in our entire portfolio. So I'm on a number of other boards. So the experience that we're bringing into it is being able to guide in areas and anticipate what's coming around the corner. And hopefully the founders take that advice.
Yeah.
And it's helpful.
I 100% agree. Like, we've had so many interesting conversations. You guys have predicted many things that came to life and to fruition, and I think we're a better company because of the board. Like, there's no way around that. So if you don't have a board, consider having a board. Maybe the last question for you. We've talked about, you've mentioned 2021 and all the craziness. So what do you think is going to happen looking forward in the future and maybe this year? Is it a good year to be raising? Should startups kind of hold out for a longer while and maybe go out to raise in 2025? Is there a good time to raise or a bad time?
So short answer is that there's never a good time or a bad time to raise. You raise when you need to. You raise when you are the most prepared. You raise when you think that there is a market pull for your product. Like, people can't wait to get it out of your hand. And you can prove that to an investor. You should definitely raise. There is a lot of capital in the system, by which I mean a lot of VC funds have raised capital. So I wouldn't wait. If you're ready, you have everything, all your ducks lined up.
Tomorrow you're going to talk about AI on a Microsoft event. Just as a soft intro to that, do you think kind of mentioning AI or even building an AI company today gives you an edge over the next round?
I don't think mentioning it per se, but I think you should be thinking about, does it make your product better? And I think, so I was at another AI event a couple of weeks ago where people were asking this question. I think if you're building a product, for example, for the construction industry or for the HR industry, and you're using AI within it, it doesn't make you an AI company. You're still in HR tech. So the problems that you need to overcome are of that industry.
So I can't have a 2-page memo if I use ChatGPT?
Probably not. So unless you're building a foundation model and you have the depth of experience and you can prove that you can get there, maybe it might work.
Okay. That's all from me. And if anybody has any questions, Pratima, I'm sure would be happy to answer. And again, you can ask both me or Pratima, whoever. I would prefer you ask her, but I'd be willing to answer any of your questions as well, if any of you have anything.
I have a question. I'm interested. I don't think we need.
No. You need the mic. You need the invisible mic.
When did you first time meet in person, and how did that look like? And how does personally meeting someone changes the relationship and talking points?
When did we meet?
Yeah.
Oh man, I don't know.
I actually don't remember.
I can't.
Because I think the investment, if I'm correct, Treblle is one of my remote investments.
Yeah, it is.
So the term sheet was signed, money was wired, we had never met.
That is true. I think I came to London the first time in October when we were doing some business.
21.
No, 22.
22.
I think, yeah. And that's the first time we met, and we've met since then. I've been to London a couple of times, but yeah. Did that change? If you ask me, I think an in-person meeting always changes. Maybe Pratima can.
No, I think it's, to be honest, I think a lot of, and when I was thinking about this event, a lot of investments happened during the COVID years, which were remote, which I think are not going to work out very well. So this, for me, by the way, Treblle is one of them, which is going to be a shining star from the remote era. But in person always works. I think this is the game that we are playing is a game of people. You have to get along. And the relationship that you have, it's a chemistry between the investor, the funder, and the founder. Sometimes this could be a 5, 7, 10-year relationship. So you really need to have an alignment in terms of people, in terms of ideas. And so meeting definitely helps.
It's also, from my personal experience, much more interesting. Like you go to San Francisco and then you discover one guy takes you to halal, the other one walks around the office like crazy, et cetera, et cetera. So I think actually, from my experience, has been it helps a lot. So if you are in a position to go meet an investor in person, I would definitely do that. I think everybody is a bit sick of basically going on Zoom calls.
Yeah, agreed.
So yeah. I wish we do one board meeting in person, but it's very hard to gather everyone. Anybody else has any questions? It's ridiculous. We have the mic, but no sound system, and then it sounds
connected
weird.
with this topic. Did you ever invested in a company that approached you, or it was always some warm interest, or the founders that you met on the events or so?
That's a hard one. So I'll have to go back and look at all the deals that I've done. I think as a fund, there have been investments which has been found by so we've got a data-driven tool ourselves, which goes out and scrapes data and finds us companies. So one that has been made by that. It's not warm intros, but I think if you think about events, right? So I think Treblle as well, we met at, not me, but our fund met him at an event. So we'll see companies in various different opportunities. It's not, as the company's raising, the deck is ready and another investor says, hey, you know what? Why don't you have a look? That's rare. In fact, I don't need other VCs to tell me which company's, raising.
Next to you.
Hi. So the question is, would you think differently or would you exclude if a small team or a single person was to come to you for a VC?
For a VC round?
Yeah, like in general, do you think different of a team that has 2 or instead, let's say 5 people?
Yeah. I understand your question. I think what I would be trying to think about is how you're going to build the various different functions that are necessary for the company to succeed. Okay, the business is not an individual. At very late stages, you have a CEO who has delegated everything. In the initial stages, a lot of those things are done by the founder. But equally, you have to have supporting actors around you. So if you have those, if you're sort of raising this based on something that's very crucial, the knowledge that you have, right? So it's your superpower that's going to lead to the success of this company. I don't think I would exclude it, but I would be thinking very hard. What are the risks? How can this fail?
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, great question. How can this fail? Yeah. Any other questions? Anybody else want to take a stab at it? No? Going once, going twice? There you go.
If you can tell me a little bit about the process, how you find the right startups for your investment. do you have any kind of process that you do, or what you're willing to share?
So I think for us, there is various different channels. So by the way, VC firms work a lot like any software company. So we're selling something, which is money. So we have a pipeline of opportunities we're looking for. So we're trying to build a pipeline. And we have both inbound and outbound. Exactly the same.
I agree.
So in those sense, I think that's how we operate. But when we're going through these opportunities where, for example, at our deal flow, for example, maybe we've had 15 new companies that as a firm we've met this week, we are looking at those opportunities with a lens of what our fund's investment thesis is and the deal that we can make. So the deal structure, can we get 15 to 20% in this company with a check of 1 to 5 million? Those are our parameters. Each fund will be different. Does this team and does this market, from the work that we've done in those sectors, look like they may be that moonshot? Again, it's very early. I mean, we don't know a lot yet. We probably had 1-2 meetings with them. But is there enough here for us to say, yes, we should spend more time trying to understand? So I would say probably those are the high-level parameters under which we're sifting those opportunities.
They literally work like a sales team. Trust me. They have a pipeline. They kind of try to fill the pipeline. They even, I know a couple of funds. These are usually larger funds. They collect any data. They have scrapers for LinkedIn. They would check when you're hiring, how much people have you fired, Crunchbase data, news about you. They basically come out and, some system spits out a hotness number from 0 to 100. Yeah. So it sometimes it works like this. Sometimes it's pretty automated, but yeah. Anybody else? That's fine. I think the pizzas are ready. Let's you can all grab a slice. Let's give Pratima 10 minutes so she can eat, and then she'll come in and mingle and maybe answer any private questions that you guys might have. But generally, thank you for coming and visiting us in Zagreb. And again, enjoy the rest of the day. Thank you all for coming to the event. We'll have more of these in the future, so stay tuned. Cool. Thanks again.